Level Up Your Band podcast, episode 46. Hello, and welcome back to the Level Up Your Band podcast. My name is Gavin Patterson, and I'm here with Julian Pombo.
Hello.
So this is take two. The internet's not been behaving, but anyway. Happy New Year. This is the first episode of 2021. Yeah, 2020 is finally over.
Yeah.
Well, it is for the listeners, but not for us, because we're currently living through.
For you guys, it'll be over. We've still got Christmas to go.
Yeah,
but
we're super prepared. I think we're always like 3 episodes in front. So
that's right.
It was Julian that came up with this idea. So to sort of start off the new year, we've got a new series that we're gonna start doing every now and again, and I don't know what I'm gonna call it yet, but it's gonna be like a case study on different bands that have had interesting careers. So like rises and falls and pros and cons and stuff, and we're gonna take a band for the week and then talk about all the stuff that they've done bad, all the stuff they've done good, and why, and all that stuff.
Yeah. And we're going to be looking at all sorts of different genres as well, not just rock. Like, we'll be looking at...
Yep.
Well, in this case, it's psychedelic rock we're dealing with, which is interesting. So, for all you this is for all you hippies out there. But we'll be looking at everything, you know. So, and if you've got bands that you'd like us to look at, and let us know as well, because we'd be totally down for that. So, let's reveal the first one. This is a band that I kind of knew a little bit about, but not too much. And now I'm really into them. I was listening to their albums a lot as I was writing the notes. So I was just listening to them in the background, and I was just like, damn, this stuff is good. This stuff is actually really good. Mm-hmm. So, there you go. There's a drum roll for you. First band is going to be Jefferson Airplane. Air horns. Yay.
Like, who's that?
So Jefferson Airplane, it's one of those bands where either people just don't know them, but they'll know the songs, or they just know the name because it's so ridiculous. So they were one of the first sort of psychedelic like rock bands to come out of San Francisco. They kind of developed that kind of sound that's kind of associated with, if you're fans of this kind of stuff, like other bands that come to mind are like the Byrds and the Grateful Dead. Gavin is... do you know what I'm talking about?
Of course I do.
Is this your thing?
Yes. It all came out of Summer of Love, San Francisco. Kind of off the back of some of the more experimental Beatles stuff. It kind of gave rise to all this weird drug-induced music. I think the first sort of psychedelic-esque album would have been the album before Sgt. Pepper. What was it called? Magical Mystery Tour. So you had things like Strawberry Fields.
Yes.
Stuff like that, and it kind of it gave rise to a whole different genre of music.
So we're gonna be kind of starting. We're not starting at the very beginning, because unfortunately, the very beginning of Jefferson Airplane isn't that interesting. Right. Sadly, the band formed in 1965, where it was the guy who founded it, Marty Balin, or Marty Balin, ruler of the mines of Moria.
I was going to say.
Marty Balin was really into the sort of like acoustic-y folk rocks kind of scene at the time, and that was kind of what he wanted to do with the band, was sort of develop that kind of a sound. And just they were doing okay, and then just members started like dropping off. Like I think one of their members, she basically got pregnant, started a family, and was like, I don't have time for the band anymore, I'm afraid, so
Right.
and just people started dropping off, and then they formed this lineup. So Marty Balin on vocals, Paul Katner, Grace Slick, Jorma Kaukonen, Jack Cassidy, and Spencer Dryden. That was like the big. This is when with this lineup, this is where everything kind of changed. So they had a really, really big success with their second album, Surrealistic Pillow, and you're going to be going cool, right? So like, what was so big about it? Well, songs like White Rabbit and Somebody to Love were in that album. So White Rabbit, not that singable, but like when you hear it, you know it. But Somebody to Love is the one that goes, I'm thinking of the chorus. Don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? That one. It just goes on and on and on and on. But it's a fun kind of like, it's just a fun kind of rock tune. And yeah, they had huge success with that. They were gigging a lot. They even did, this is cool, I didn't know this, they were actually the first band to use chroma key ever in a television performance.
Okay.
So like green screens.
Oh.
Yeah. So they performed those two big singles.
Didn't know that.
White Rabbit and Somebody to Love. And they have this like, sorry, I some editing work for you, but some like mad like lava lamp style like psychedelic backing. It just looks like they're floating in space, basically. But yeah, you should check it out. I'll send you the video. I mean, like for us now, with what we know, we know what green screens can do now, but so it looks very primitive. But at the time, it would have been like, "Whoa, far out, dude! That's crazy."
Yeah, I mean that's really early on. What's that?
Very early. This is 1966.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, the only other sort of place you would see that kind of thing, it would be like Disney Studios, and and it was really, really rare because it was so difficult. They didn't have computer technology.
So let's talk about this new lineup. So the two big kind of big changes where they used to have like an acoustic bass player, like an upright bass player initially, and he left, and then they got this guy Jack Cassidy playing bass. So and he has a very particular style. When you actually listen to it, it's a very active kind of bass playing style. It's so wondery. It goes up and down, like all over the place, and it's just dynamic and interesting. That was big change number one that I noticed. And then change number two is Grace Slick, who you're gonna be hearing that surname a lot. Slick. Actually, you're gonna be hearing Slick and Katner quite a lot. But on top of just being, there was a lot of things which kind of like she added to the band. So her vocals are amazing. She's got this like massive. I mean, it was at the time they were gigging around the same time as, you know, like Janis Joplin, and she had this huge, like, contralto, like, big boomy voice. You know, so there was that. She wrote the two singles that band is known for, White Rabbit and Somebody to Love. She wrote those songs.
Right.
Like, just phenomenal songwriter. In fact, you'll notice that, like, a lot of the songs that went popular, she had a hand in them.
Right.
But you'll see how that comes into play. And on top of that, she was just great stage presence as well. Like, made such a big impact to the band's live presence in general. This is gonna sound awful, and taken out of context, it's gonna sound bad. But there's nothing more boring than going to see a band and there's just like four bros standing there being boring. It's just like, but as soon as you add a little bit of change to the mix and you have like an active, charismatic woman leading the charge, it can make a big difference. I'm not saying it has to be a woman. What made the big, I mean, it helped at the time because she, apart from, as well as being charismatic, she was also a model, you know, so she was very eye-catching, right? But the main emphasis is what I'm not saying. I don't want to be taken out of context here. I'm not saying you have to be beautiful to be a charismatic frontman, right? Because look at Meatloaf. That's all I'm going to say. Right?
Yep.
Right? So, all what you need is the charisma.
Yes.
It really, really helps.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And she basically has all like the three magic components that you need for a good band member: the charisma, phenomenal musician, and her songwriting ability was insane.
Yeah.
So that was something that was going really well for them at the time. They really had developed quite a unique sound at the time. They had taken the sort of more rock and roll kind of elements and more sort of like the sort of hippie-ish like acoustic elements as well, and kind of mashed them together and created this kind of new thing, which was, I mean, to us it kind of sounds pretty like, yeah, we've heard a million bands like that, but like at the time it was very new. Yeah. And you can really, the thing that's interesting is that you can hear all the individual voices in the band. Yeah, you can hear like Jack, like Cassidy's bass playing coming through. Everybody's vocals is super clear. Anybody who's singing, you know, and the guitars sound great, you know. So as well as like blending together to create a sound, like being able to also hear the individuality of every member, that was something that worked for them. And I think, I mean, I touched on this before, but the level of musicianship in this band is insane. I'm giving one of the example that I'm giving here is Jorma Kaukonen wrote an acoustic solo guitar piece, which is on that album, Surrealistic Pillow, called Embryonic Journey. It is beautiful, and it's so expertly played. It's fantastic. So go check that out. Check out that album, Surrealistic Pillow. It's a great name for an album. I love the album art cover. It's so goofy. It's so off its time.
I'm gonna have a look.
So yeah, that's kind of, and this kind of goes back to a lot of things that we've talked about in the past, you know, like good, strong band members, excellent musicianship, good songwriting, and an interesting sound, which is new, not totally foreign, but new enough for people to kind of grasp and go, oh, like, this is interesting, this is different. So that was a lot of good stuff that he did. Now, after Surrealistic Pillow, things start taking a bit of a... So, like, if I could do it as a graph, it kind of does that, like a big old spike, and then you just start slowly seeing a very, very gradual, just downward slope.
Yep.
And there's a lot of things contributing to this, so which we'll go through, right? So after Surrealistic Pillow, it looked great. Gigging loads, lots of TV opportunities as well. But what had happened was, I think it was because of the success of those two songs, White Rabbit and Somebody to Love, which were the heavier tracks. Like, the whole album's great, in my opinion. I especially like Marty Balin's songwriting, because he specializes more. He there's some really lovely sort of like softer ballads and love songs in that album, which just sound beautiful. Just really, really nicely, tastefully executed. But I think they kind of looked at White Rabbit and Somebody to Love and they went, we need to go heavier. And I think that's kind of where music was heading at that time anyway. This is around 1967, 68.
Yep.
So you can, if you listen to their third album, Bathing at Baxter's, the sound, it's still a good album. I enjoyed it. But there's a lot of weirdness in there.
Weirdness.
Yeah. There's one album which there's one song which I hate because it's the hit. It's Music Concrete, which I just can't stand.
Right.
They started implementing things like that. Starting getting a bit more experimental. You need to try these things. Music. But it wasn't music. I just remember listening to it, and it just totally took me out of it. Because the first track, I can't remember the name of it, but it just starts off, and it's just like, oh, cool, this is just like more kind of heavy, psychedelic-y rock. Like, I'm into this. And then the Music Concrete stuff came in, and I was just like, no. Please.
Yeah, Music Concrete.
Just like straight.
When I hear that word,
camera,
it just takes me back to standard grade music.
Yeah.
Like, this is Music Concrete. It's basically just sound effects all mashed together, and then you get some intellectual come along and say, oh, this is profound. If you don't agree with me, you're a dum-dum. That's basically what it is.
It's basically the equivalent of the Emperor's... It's the musical equivalent of the Emperor's New Clothes.
Yes.
Look at this music that I made. Wow. It's such good, intelligent music.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
It's like postmodernism.
Anyway. If there's
what do you call that? Modern art. It's just... Stop. It's not good. It's just not good.
Oh, yeah.
It's objectively bad.
There's some stuff. I mean, it depends. It depends on what it is. But... At some point, a human poo covered in gold is just a human poo covered in gold. There's no artistic element there, Reminds me of the story of the guy who, like, put a banana or a pair of glasses on the floor, and people were like, huh.
Yes.
Looking at the pair of glasses and like, wow. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So it started doing that. On top of that, this again goes back to the two singles that they wrote. Katner and Slick started taking over the writing more and more and more, and we're starting to write songs that were just edgier and edgier. There was even a song where I think one of the bands they were touring with, I wish I'd written this down because I was just like, what? But one of the bands that they were playing with, I think it was the Birds, they had written a song about, I think it was Slick, or it was Slick's brother-in-law wrote this song. It was basically a song about a threesome.
Okay.
And about having a threesome, and there were a bunch of bands that were like, yeah, like, can you not? It's a bit weird. It was basically the equivalent. It was the 1967-68 equivalent of WAP.
Oh no.
It was, but it was 1968, so it was probably way more taste. We listen to it now, and we're like, oh, it's a pretty tasteful song.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were starting to go down that kind of route, and it wasn't just like free love stuff. It was their music started getting a bit more anti-establishment, which kind of reflects the times a bit more. Because 1967-68, that was like Vietnam.
Yeah.
Or just after Vietnam, yeah. So a lot of the songs at the time, even songs like just right, like Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On," which is a more subtle, it's not even subtle. It's quite blatant, like what is going on? This is terrible. But like they were kind of going down that route, and because of that, the founder of the band, poor Mr. Balin, was like, they were just kind of pushing them aside, and this is where you start getting lots of little rifts happening.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of where it kind of starts dissolving a little bit. So, the rest of the band started openly criticizing Balin's songwriting. You should never. Right, I'm gonna look straight into the camera for this. Don't do that. Rude. Right? Naughty. Right? If you're doing that in a band right now, don't do that. That's just rude. It's just not nice.
So what do you mean? What do you mean by criticize? Do you mean like, oh, I think it should maybe go like this? So I see what you're doing there. Blah,
not
blah, blah.
Constructive criticism.
Right. Okay.
Just like your songs are boring.
Okay.
We don't like them.
Right.
Stop writing pretty love songs that sound nice. And
Gotcha.
Balin was like, no, because I like them. And to be honest, I'm not that into this whole like anti-establishment, drug
Punky stuff.
hippie anyway. Or I'm starting to become a bit more. He was starting to definitely become disenchanted with the whole thing, and we'll get into that a lot later.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, so you can already start to see it kind of breaking down a little bit.
Yeah.
Still loads of success when they were touring though, and they were still White Rabbit and Somebody to Love playing them loads and loads and loads.
Yeah.
But they were actually the first band to play all three, Woodstock, Altamont, and Monterey Pop, which were like the really big festivals in the 60s at that time.
Mm.
Like, first band to play them like one after the other, which is insane. And their Woodstock performance is legendary. It's really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Highly I highly recommend you check it out. So let's have a look at where things start to go bad. So it starts happening around 1970 is when things start really, really taking a turn. So a couple of things started happening, which was the individual band members were starting to develop their own side projects.
Oh.
With other members of the band.
Oh. Yeah. Seen that.
And yeah. Now, we're not saying that if you're in a band, you can't start a separate band. That's totally fine. But it should be like, it's like, what's the best way to put it? Like, just make it a completely different project. A completely different thing.
Yep.
Because what was happening here is that people were kind of breaking up into smaller subgroups and things, and were following their own interests, and they were kind of just developing. They were focusing more on that than the band. So the writing really, really, really started to go, and you can see that in their. So there might be some Jefferson Airplane fans that are listening to this, and they're going, "You're wrong." But like,
So
I mean, charts wise, you can see a steady decline. Like I think it's after like Bathing at Baxter's. I think that was like the last time they ever properly charted.
aye.
It was just a steady slope. Anybody who was buying their albums, they were already hardcore Jefferson Airplane fans, and that was about it. There wasn't any new people going to discover their stuff.
It almost looks as if that the main leadership of the band ceased. So would you call him Balin or Balin or whatever his name is?
Yeah,
he was the guy driving the goal of the band, and for whatever reason, it was taken off him, and it was going in lots of different directions.
Yeah, there was basically almost like a coup d'etat,
yes,
kind of thing happening with Slick and Katner basically taking over. Not to mention, they also got into. They were also having a thing as well, which is
no.
Yeah, it's kind of like it was kind of giving me what you call it, Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, a little bit
vibes as well. Which Fleetwood Mac, that'd be another interesting band to look at. But so yeah, that was happening. There wasn't so much interest in the music anymore from audiences and from the band itself. And this should go without saying, they were starting to develop some pretty serious alcohol and cocaine addictions. And I mean serious. And this was kind of the tipping point for Balin, because he basically wanted nothing to do with it. It wasn't so much with what individual band members were doing, but it was actually after Janis Joplin died. He was just like, I don't want to be involved with any music that has to do anything with cocaine. So he just left. And then basically it was just like, well, what's the best way to? It's weird. Like, even though like what, as soon as you get rid of the founding member, who's actually driving the thing and had the original vision, like the whole thing, it's like the foundation, basically, the whole thing just crumbles.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And they had a couple more releases, I think, and then after that they basically left Jefferson Airplane behind. Slick and Katner did their own thing, and Katner was getting into science fiction at the time, so he had basically started. They took a break, and then they started a new band, Jefferson Starship, which, if you'd like us, there's a whole big thing with them, and if you'd like us to look into Jefferson Starship, let us know.
Yeah.
But
it's the spin-off.
But it's basically the spin-off of Jefferson Airplane.
Their biggest hit being
No, that's just Starship.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So Jefferson Starship then turned into Starship, which became,
everyone knows that one,
known for We Built This City.
Yeah.
Which is possibly the worst song ever written.
Next to Man, I Feel Like a Woman by Shania Twain. For me personally.
Yeah. She has written better songs in my opinion. I'm more of a fan of what's it called? That don't impress me much. But I think that's a better.
It is a better song. Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. So then it became Jefferson Starship, but that's a story for another day. So let's actually have a look and see what went wrong, because we've also spoken about this in previous podcasts. This is just a good way. You learn about a band, and then you just it's a good way to recap things we talked about. Don't do drugs, kids. I'm going to look into the camera again for this. Don't do drugs. Stop it. All right? At least don't overdo it. I mean, I'm not your dad. I can't tell you what to do.
Podcast dad.
Any kind of drug use, even if it's like not a problem for you just now, it's just going to turn into a drain, right?
Yeah.
And it's a drain on your health. It's a drain on your creativity. And it's a drain on your wallet.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
If you think different, send me some scientific papers and I might change my mind.
Peer reviewed.
But at the moment, send me some peer reviewed like
scientific journals.
Anyway, scientific journals. Yeah. Health and don't do it, guys. Like it never leads anywhere good. I've never heard of and the thing about it as well is that the alluring thing about drugs, because I know, because I've never been a heavy. I smoked weed a couple of times, guys. Crazy, but you do get that initial like creative buzz, and it's interesting, right? And you pursue it, but it can be very easy to sort of become reliant on that. And half the time, I'm being honest, like I've recorded some stuff that ideas that I've had whilst I've been drunk or intoxicated in some way, and none of them have been good.
Right, okay.
They've always been terrible, you know? So maybe that's just me, but don't use them to enhance your creativity, you know.
Even just from a wallet
access
standpoint,
the ninth dimension.
Like even like I said, from a wallet standpoint, it's like I said, I've never done anything. I think I've had about 10 drinks in my entire life. I'm total teetotal, straight edge person. It's never taken my fancy. But I grew up with people who were in similar financial circumstances as me, and yet I always had more money than them because they were constantly spending money on all this stuff. And they can never afford new guitars. They can never afford new drum kits and
strings.
It just, I was like, you're just holding back yourself and those around you, especially if you're in a band, because your behavior doesn't just affect you; it affects everyone around you. I'm gonna even cigarettes, man. Yes, they're so. If you have a cigarette habit, like, start thinking about quitting it. It's a net negative.
Just stopping it.
It's a net negative.
It is.
There's some things you can enjoy.
Lose money.
You can enjoy a drink or an occasional whatever every now and again, but it's when it becomes excessive. It's just like nah.
And it just you stop kind of thinking about the music and you just kind of fixate on that kind of a thing, you know. So just don't do drugs. Basically, don't do drugs. Don't know why I keep taking my glasses off for it. I think it's going to make me look more serious, but I never look serious. Stay humble. So we have talked about this before. The other thing that was happening is that after their success, their Slick's ego, anyway, from what I've read, from what I've researched, just went off the wall. And, you know, acting like a rock star is never a good thing. We're not saying as well, like, keep putting yourself down and going, oh, I'm never going to be good enough, you know. And you might be sitting there, it might be that one listener who's listened to the podcast has got like 3 number 1 singles or something. Don't beat yourself down constantly. That's not helpful either. But just keep yourself in check. Like, just remember where you came from, you know. Remember where you are just now, you know. and don't big yourself up too much. On top of that, you'll just become more likable as well. Before decide, this is a good one. I think this goes back to the genre hopping episode that we did. Before you decide to make a big 180, just check with how the rest of the band feels.
What do you mean?
So, like, for example, when Jefferson Airplane decided to go for a much heavier, more experimental sound, it sounds like they didn't really check with how Valen was, or they did check and they didn't care.
Aye.
Do you see what I mean? So, see where everybody's at. You know, if you're in a, let's say you're in an indie band, right? But you've been listening to a lot of progressive metal or gent, and you're thinking, you know, this band could do with some gent breakdowns, right? Now, I'm all for breakdowns because I think they're fun, all right? And actually, when implemented properly, they can really add to it. I've actually noticed this happening in jazz a lot. Like they've taken the sort of gent idea of just like one note or like one chord, kind of like repeated and like doing different kind of rhythms on it. They've taken that idea and they've started using it, right? So see where the rest of the band is. Don't go full gent, maybe, but just have a little touch,
yeah,
a little sprinkle. That's kind of what I'm getting at, you know.
Yeah.
If you're gonna start making changes, make them gradual changes.
Yes.
Basically.
Well, if you're that's the point in a band. A band is when you have a band and you have a name of a band, that name means something. It means a certain flavour or an artistic thing, collection of things, ideas, whatever it happens to be. And when that changes too fast or rapidly, people get confused and usually just bail out. They just forget about it. Any band that has done like crazy changes in like overnight, it's either, most of the time it doesn't work, but occasionally it can be a good thing. It depends on the context, but generally speaking, you want to have a fairly consistent artistic vision through the entire life of a band. Otherwise it's just not the band anymore. You might as well just change the name and say, we are not this band anymore, we are now this band.
We're now this band, yeah.
That's exactly. It's kind of, it's the whole point in having a band.
Totally, which kind of, it beautifully goes into the next point, which is, you know, develop your sound, develop your art, but remember who your audience is, who you're actually writing for, right? So, let's take this as an example, right? Let's say you play in a country band, right? And all your releases so far, you're a really successful country band, but all your releases so far have been pretty acoustic, right? Acoustic guitar, bass, drums, maybe you got banjo, some keys, right? Maybe an electric guitar if you're feeling spicy, right? But as you're playing more, you're obviously going to develop your sound a little bit more, because that's just naturally what happens, is that things, you change and you develop over time, and you start adding more southern rock kind of influences in there, so the guitar gets a bit heavier, you know? It still has its roots in country, right?
Yeah.
You're still keeping your audience in mind. What we're saying here is, trying to be really careful with this, because I'm not trying to say write music for your audience.
No.
Don't do that. That's the worst thing you could do. Write music because you enjoy the art of writing music, and you write it for yourself, and people will genuinely prefer that more, because if you start just appealing to somebody and you're trying to please people, that never helps. Okay, but remember, try to remember your audience. Appreciate them. Appreciate where they're coming from. Appreciate why they came to you in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So, for example, actually, we could use the band Eriska as an example, right? A lot of our band, right? A lot of people will have probably listened to us or come to us because they like traditional Scottish music.
Yep.
Right? And we've played a lot of traditional actual traditional Scottish tunes, right? Now we've kind of started just writing our own music. But just because we started writing our own music doesn't mean that we're just writing random stuff. Like the music is very much still rooted in that traditional sound. Exactly. It's the sound is still there. It's just that we're not playing traditional tunes anymore, but that sound is still there. It's basically the same idea.
Yeah, so I think the moral of this particular band story sounds to me like lack of leadership. Just as I know nothing about it, just from what you've told me, but it looks to be some breakdown in leadership between Marty Balin and the other two, and some internal conflicts of who's driving the goals and sound of the band, and there was some disagreement, and it looks like the initial goal for the band was changed to something that was not in keeping with the original goal, and then it became a totally different band. It became a totally different thing, and when you start confusing audiences that have already seen your stuff, when you start confusing them, they just go, ugh, they turned into this thing, blah blah blah. It's like Metallica fans. You know, with the whole, they're not how they used to be. But if the new Metallica just started as a brand new band and made their own music, they would attract their own fans, and people wouldn't moan how they changed.
Yeah. We should have Dario to talk about Metallica, because I know he's a big Metallica fan.
Aye.
Or have I got that wrong?
No, he is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know nearly enough about them.
I know a little bit, because I listened to a lot of metal when I was in school, and Metallica, early Metallica, so like Master of Puppets and stuff, was like my go-to.
Yeah.
So it might be a good idea. Anyway, let us know what bands you actually want us to talk about. I thought Jefferson Airplane was a pretty interesting example.
Yeah. I'd never heard of them. Personally,
no. If you haven't listened to any of that kind of music from that kind of time, like 60s stuff, it's honestly, it is a good time. I enjoyed it. Like, this is me personally, like, giving my review. Like, even some of the stuff that wasn't as widely accepted at the time, or didn't do as well, there's a lot of good stuff in there. So but that second album, what's it called again? Surrealistic Pillow, is a brilliant album. 100% go and listen to that. Just because the writing in it and the playing in it is great.
Yeah. Cool. So we'll think of some other bands at some point to cover. But we'll just continue with regular scheduled programming, whatever that happens to be. But we'll throw one of these in every now and again, maybe once a month or once every 2 months or something. Just some interesting. There's a lot of different bands we could cover. Just talking about the successes and failures, and it always tends to be those five things.
There might be a couple that will surprise you. I think this was a good one because it basically drives home the points that we make.
Potentially,
every time.
Yeah, we could be completely was it confirmation bias? But I think we covered this in the what was it? 5 reasons why your
band sucks.
No. That was music theory. It was
That was music.
5 but basically 5 steps to avoid band breakup, and it always seems to be these 5, and that's lack of momentum, lack of management, money, clashing personalities, musical differences, which kind of it coincides with the other one, which was it's kind of in the same line, was episode 45, which was last episode, I believe. How to find the right band for you. So that was again leadership, songwriting, arranging, management, money, and it's kind of goes along the how to avoid band breakup thing, and it's always one of those 5, unless it's like death, like Leonard Skinner all dying in a plane crash, or Buddy Holly plane crash.
Yeah.
Taking that out of it, obviously, but the things that can be avoided, the things that you can work on to avoid band breakup, and you tend to find that most band stories that when they do break up tends to be one of the 5. So we'll see how accurate that is. The more we talk about other bands, we might find one that's an exception.
For sure.
That would be cool.
I mean, there's a lot of bands that are still gigging. They haven't broken up.
Yeah.
But they just haven't been making an impact, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
So.
Cool.
But yeah.
That's Jefferson Airplane then. So next week, not sure what's happening. I've got a couple of ideas for some guests. Again, if you know of anyone who's a cool individual and would like to be interviewed, give us a suggestion and we'll see what we can do. And
we've only interviewed traditional musicians and jazz musicians. So
pretty much, yeah.
If you're any other kind of musician, please get in touch.
Yeah. We're open to any suggestions. So as always, if you enjoy the podcast, please give us a wee rating and review on Apple, which would really help get the podcast out there more. And share it with anyone. If you have a pal who's maybe interested in music podcasts, send it along. It really helps us get the word out. And we also have some downloadable free PDFs on the website, just with some topics on music theory and a couple more on affordable gear and manager tools. So if you're running your own band, there's a list of sort of managerial software that you can download just to help you kind of run your band. So everything from bookkeeping all the way to like answering emails and stuff, which is pretty cool. And you'll find that at www.levelupyourband.com. And we are on Instagram, Facebook, all the rest of it, so you can check it out. We release weekly posts, just linked to the podcast, and we also release the video on Facebook and YouTube, which you can watch. So you can see my freezing iPad randomly glitching because of crap internet. It's really good and fun, and yeah, fantastic. So anyway, hope you all had a good new year, and have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.